Quackity quack. We are backity back with another episode of the Duck on a Rock Sports Podcast. I'm Colin McDonough. This will be a quick hitter episode talking some UConn men's basketball. At the time of our recording, UConn is 24-3 and 14-2 in the Big East. They're sitting in second place in conference play. They're going to be likely a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, so second seed unless they turn things a little bit around and get a 1 seed. But for the Huskies, going for 3 national titles in 4 years, the spot they're in right now should be met with excitement from the fans and the team alike. They have a chance to make history. They've been consistently ranked all season in the top 5, top 10. Their only losses, a tough one with missing 2 of their key players at Gamble to Arizona, who spent a lot of weeks at number 1, and a resurgent Red Storm at Madison Square Garden. So they can get revenge against St. John's anyway, but even before the dud at Gamble against a mediocre at best Creighton team, a Blue Jays team that always gives the Huskies trouble, the vibes have been off. So even in championship years, UConn gets some puzzling losses. This year, they've kind of played down to their competition, but still won most of the games until Creighton. We wrote on duckonrocksports.com, where you could go for podcast episodes, commentary articles. We wrote in January that it was still a fun and entertaining year with close Big East games. Even if it did seem like UConn was playing down to that competition, they had multiple close calls with Providence, Georgetown, Seton Hall, and it had some fans sounding alarm bells for what it meant in March in the Big East tournament and NCAA tournament for UConn. But even still, the Huskies found ways to win close and exciting games during this winter. Then on Valentine's Day night, when Alex Karaban became the winningest Husky ever, Hashim Thabit joined the Huskies of Honor, and Emeka Okafor set to get his number 50 retired a few days later. Beating Georgetown, winning another close game, multiple people, including Ed Cooley, including Dan Hurley, even some UConn fans online complained of a quieter crowd, a crowd that started to leave early, that didn't stay for interview with Karaban after, and even for a crowd that didn't even show up fully. Now, it was an 8 p.m. on a Saturday night on Valentine's Day against Georgetown, albeit a historical rival, not a team that has moved the needle for fans in this kind of iteration of the Big East. So Hurley, who I've said I can never publicly criticize fully, I still won't do that even on this podcast episode. I've said that since after the 2023 national championship win, even before he and the Huskies went back-to-back in 2024. I said you can't critique him too much ever for what he's done for UConn. Once a coach wins a title for the school, you cannot. I've stayed consistent with this for all 3 coaches who have won titles for UConn, even if most of the UConn fan base has not. Another plug to our site. This is a throwback. Our first ever article in August 2024 was us arguing Kevin Ollie should be in the Huskies of Honor. We stand by that. So Jim Calhoun, Kevin Ollie, Dan Hurley, for what they've done for the University of Connecticut, you can't ever fully criticize them. And I won't out of my own principle, even if it's a faulted one. But Hurley did criticize the UConn fan base and the fans in particular who were showing up that night. So this happens everywhere, especially in the Northeast markets. We've seen it with our favorite pro teams in Boston and New York, and but for UConn, the crowd has been talked about all the time, by a lot of coaches, even dating back to when myself and the Mats of Duck on a Rock were students at UConn. Just even Calhoun or players talking about crowd amping them up, crowd helping them, even just the last 15 years, the ebbs and flows of the crowd at Rensselaer Field and what it means for the UConn football program at large has been talked about. This time did feel different, though, because it not only was the post-game comments, Ed Cooley talking about it. I mean, he has enough of his own problems he should worry about. Maybe that was just a little bit of a defense mechanism or deflection by the former Providence and current Georgetown head coach. But it wasn't just those Hurley comments after the tough win, but Hurley and the UConn social media staff doubled down with a video posted to all socials imploring that the basketball capital of the world be a madhouse, that they need him. It was kind of awkward that it was posted and awkward for me to watch. I know you want a good crowd, obviously, and they're trying to get the fan base excited. But they've already done that with the last few years, their success, and the team is competing for a Big East regular season title, is still competing for a 1 seed, a 3rd national championship in 4 years, a 7th national championship in school history. That's the main focus, and that would be the only focus, you'd think, right? So the crowd showed up in a classic whiteout that looked like 2004, fitting for honoring Emeka Okafor, but the team did not show up on the court. This team is allowed to have an off game. I think UConn fans should allow a lot of off games. I mean, just generally speaking, they've won a lot of close games. They still only have 3 losses. This is a program that has won national titles with lower seeds. Yes, you want to be concerned with the play, but there should never really ever be panic with UConn. So the team is allowed to have an off game. Honestly, the fans should be allowed too. If Georgetown was considered that to the team, that's okay too, but with the fans, UConn has a great fan base. But those two things together created the perfect storm of fans on Twitter and message boards complaining about Hurley and the team's performance after Hurley complained about the fans' performance in the previous game. So it kind of, again, made a little more of an awkward, weird, dynamic and back and forth in, the Twitterverse, or just the stratosphere that we can't reach out and grab in today's world of social media and, similar to this podcast, things that are just there in the world for us to consume. So now a couple of things. So Hurley did bring up places like Xavier or Creighton as atmospheres that are nuts, right? And if you watch, all the different ways you can watch college basketball now, there's still the ESPN 7 and 9 p.m. time slots that are the classic Big Mondays and Super Tuesdays on ESPN, with Peacock and the NBC Sports broadcasts and Fox Sports broadcasts. You can basically see every type of environment any night of the week from mid-majors up. And, there are some gyms and arenas that do look like it has a better student section. Some of that has to do with seating or just a louder student section. Some of it has just an overall more rabid crowd. All these things could be true, but that's not to say that UConn doesn't have great crowds in Hartford and Storrs. I think also when you think of the Big East, places like Xavier or Creighton, neither school has been to a Final Four. Even places like Providence, or even with the Renaissance at St. John's has had the last couple years. Some of these places, either no Final Four, none since the 80s with St. John's or Providence. These are Big East teams that, unlike Villanova, did not take advantage of the UConn-less Big East years. So UConn doesn't really have an equal in this era of the Big East. No school, especially after Hurley's 2 titles, now UConn having 6, comes close. these crowds also, when UConn visits, feed off the villain that is UConn and Hurley, right? So even in the old Big East, Georgetown, just take 2009 as an example. Georgetown was only one national championship behind UConn, and coming off a Final Four 2 years prior. Syracuse, again, one national championship behind UConn. Pitt would win Big East, right? Or even newcomers to that version of the Big East like Louisville had more history and current success combined than arguably UConn did at that time. So it felt like UConn had equal and opposite forces that they were going against in the Big East that led, maybe Gampel or back then the XL Center crowd to be a little more nuts, right? At the same time, the games we've been to in the last few years, the crowds don't feel that different than days we were students or, different good old days depending on your age, right? So now in the Big East, we are by far the best men's team and villain, right? The other factor is with all the recent success, our own home crowds might not have the feverish madhouse atmosphere every single second of every single game because of that winning, right? When the Ollie years started to end, again, you can read the article from August 2024. We're always going to be Ollie apologists on here. The American Conference didn't help with matchups against, the Wichita States of the world instead of more regional rivals. But Hurley and the Big East return. Hurley and his staff have rebuilt everything. And if you think about it, made it arguably better than it's ever been. We're getting to a point where if Hurley ties Jim Calhoun, we could have all sorts of conversations, online about a lot of different UConn opinions. Our crowds may not be that traditional look of the Cameron Crazies at Duke or Kansas in the fog, or even Xavier or Creighton or Providence, that this is kind of some of these Big East games. Even you think of St. John's going to Providence last week with the fight and all that stuff. Some of those singular games are huge and almost look a little bit crazier, but we're the basketball capital of the world, not due to the student section or alumni or regular fans being the craziest and bring the best energy and having the best atmosphere, bar none, in America. Even with that great fan base, the nickname is because of the success on the court. So that's where, Hurley said he has equity and he has contributed to that success, 2 out of 6 national championships. But, the basketball capital kind of name is not just talked about because look at our student section jumping up and down or the fans staying to the end, and being the best, most loyal fan base through thick and thin, even if it is a great fan base. Now, if UConn had come out and smoked Creighton, I really thought it was going to be like that. Hurley's call to the fans would have been a rallying cry, a big turning point at the end of the season. The fans and coach back fully cheering a win as the season winds down. It didn't happen. That didn't happen. And Hurley told reporters after the game that he felt like an idiot. He gave credit to the crowd, said they were awesome and that the team let the crowd down. So credit to Hurley on that. So to me, hopefully that will end this chapter. That if UConn does complete 3 titles in 4 years, it'll go down as a silly, funny anecdote of, remember that week in February that Hurley was mad about a Valentine's Day crowd. They made a silly social media video and, fans got mad for an instant and then forgot about it, right? So hopefully the fans forgive Hurley and move on to the goals that the team is moving on to as well, right? There's no reason for all involved to keep making this a story. Fans have said their piece online, on Twitter, on message boards, like I said, the last couple of days. Hurley had said his side, and he's kind of said, okay, I was wrong, and it did not work for a win, and we have to move on. So I think fans in a day or two will do the same thing. And the home crowd is almost done for the year anyway. Neutral site games will become the most important part of the season, as they are in college basketball. The Big East tournament at MSG and wherever the Huskies end up, it may not be the East region anymore. We'll have to just focus on those games to kind of see how this UConn season ends. It's kind of felt a little bit at times like 2024, and then a little bit at times like 2023, and then maybe a mix of other national championship years from the past, or it might not end up being that way. This could also be a UConn team that gets to the national title game, gets to the Final Four, and we just have to see who else is there, whether it be some of the other heavy hitters this year with 1 or 2 losses for most of the year, or 3 losses like Michigan, Houston, again, Arizona. These teams, if we look at, in Illinois that UConn already beat, Purdue that UConn got in the national championship game a couple years ago, we have to just see what happens with those tournament matchups. But, so even with that kind of tangent there, enough about the crowd, enough about Hurley's criticisms about the crowd. Because if UConn does win that national championship this year, if UConn does win a 3rd national championship in 4 years and 7th in school history, the only crowds that will matter will be the welcome home rally in Storrs and the parade in Hartford. So for this quick podcast episode, Duck on a Rock, we're going to be back to putting out some podcast episodes. Please follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, where we're getting the most views for our podcast episodes. And also, please follow duckonarocksports.com. We also post any articles we do and the podcast episodes on there, as well as links to it from social media. So thank you for listening tonight. Thank you for being a part of our flock. And special shout out to Belen and Mason.